for a while here at Waukesha, and then I did take a full-time position in Oconomowoc. My career as a nurse has been mostly in a cardiac ICU setting. I've been all over. I went to college in Madison, and I also have an exercise phys degree besides my nursing, so that's where Glenn, I'm a specialist in exercise, I don't know about that, but I've worked mostly as a nurse, so, and then I worked at Columbia St. Mary's. That was my first job. I moved from there, this was in the 90s, and then I moved to Aspen and lived in Aspen for a while with my husband, and then we moved to Portland, Oregon, and we were out there for 13 years because we just couldn't seem to leave. And so then we came back in 2013 to be closer to family because our families are here. So, and I ended up here at Pro Healthcare. But tonight, Glenn wanted me to really talk about exercise, and I thought maybe this would be a better topic. Some of this stuff that is in my presentation I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because it's things you already know, but there are some things that I think you might find interesting. So we've got some good tips, and I didn't pass out a lot. I certainly didn't pass out my entire presentation, because if you want a copy of this, just let Glenn know, and I'd be happy to give you a full copy of the PowerPoint, but I just passed out a couple of things. I think less paper is better. I've got some tips that I passed out that you can do one of these. You can do two of them. If you're like Glenn, you can do them all. You can post this on your fridge and do one a week. They're all really good tips. I couldn't put everything on there, but I tried to put as much as I could on those little tips. So to start, can anybody tell me what is the #1 cause of death in the United States? Does anybody know?
Heart disease.
Yes. And I want you to know that heart disease, they say, is 90% preventative. 90% from lifestyle changes. There's 10% where there's a genetic component. They say that 90% of heart disease can be prevented with lifestyle changes. The first thing I'm going to talk about is, let's see if I can figure out how to click this thing over here. Oh. So this is the most important thing you can do if you still smoke, is to stop smoking. We now know that there are many toxins in tobacco. We're not going to spend much time talking about smoking at all. We all now know how bad smoking is, and there are a lot of resources to help quit smoking if you still smoke. But just by quitting, you will reduce the risk of heart disease and cancer. I want to spend quite a bit of time talking about this, inflammation, and this gets a little bit sticky. So what I want you to remember about inflammation is this, is they believe that inflammation is the cause of all disease. And this is kind of a new theory. It's been circulating for like the last decade, but really is starting to get a lot of press lately just because of the research that's been done on eggs. I don't know if you've heard this recent research, but they did that study with the eggs, and they found that the eggs do not affect your cholesterol if eaten in moderation. And I think they're finding similar things to saturated fat, so it's really flipping what we've been taught for all these years and told. It's kind of flipping things around, but inflammation, there are 3 things that cause inflammation. And I've kind of put them in different orders. There's 2 pages to this PowerPoint. So all I want you to remember is bad oil and sugar. That's all you really have to know. The bad oil are actually the trans fats, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But what really causes a lot of the inflammation is this imbalance of omega-6 fats to omega-3s. And those are both those are the polyunsaturated fats that they've told us are so good for us. And when you walk down the supermarket aisle and you see that corn oil bottle with a heart on it, it makes me sick, because the research they did on this, they never separated these 2 fats out, and they're very different. So the omega-3s are really good for us, and the omega-6s are okay in a moderation, but we eat like a 15-to-1 ratio. Sometimes it's higher in this country. It should be 3-to-1 or less. So the omega-6 fats are all the corn oil, soybean oil, sunflower seed oil, safflower oil. Canola oil is considered a mix. Oh, come on in. Come on in.
Gary,
Sure, we got a seat. You could actually sit here if you don't want to sit. I don't know if you can see very well in the corner.
This would be a bad seat,
Yeah, it'll be a bad seat.
I gotta move way down here.
Take a phone call.
So
Olive oil.
I thought that.
olive oil is
I'm not gonna
excellent.
sit
So
there. I'm
canola
gonna put a
oil
chair
is
down
a
for you.
good oil, but it's important to buy the canola oil as number one, expeller pressed. Because if you don't, the canola oil is from the rapeseed, and if they squeeze the oil out, that's good. If they use chemicals to get the oil out, which is in your regular canola oil, that's not good.
Is it on the computer?
That doesn't matter. That's just marketing. It'll
Okay.
say expeller pressed, and it's even better if you can buy it organic because canola is pretty contaminated. So I guess if you're gonna bake, that's what I would do. I would buy a really higher quality canola oil. But these other oils, all these oils are in everything. They're in everything in a box, in a bag that you eat, chips, crackers, anything refined. And as Americans, we're eating too much of this stuff. So this has become an issue, and it's caused inflammation, which is damaging all of our vascular walls. And this isn't new. I mean, this is I read this 10 years ago. I remember putting my mom on this low inflammation diet 15 years ago when she had a major surgery. I made her eat, foods that were low in inflammation. So this is not new news, but I think this change of the oils being bad, people don't really understand that. They think, these vegetable oils are good for us, and they're actually not. With the exception of canola. But like I said, make sure canola oil is expeller pressed. And it should, if you can buy it organic, it's going to be expensive, but that's up to you. But at least if it's pressed, there'll be less chemicals in it.
Do they say that on the label if it's pressed or?
It does. Expeller, it'll say pressed.
Okay.
Mhm.
Because that's what I
Yep.
will look at.
Yep. And that's important because if it's not pressed, like the regular, like the Mazola canola
Or
oil.
the store brand.
Yeah,
probably.
it's just they've used a lot of chemicals to get that oil out of the seed,
Yeah,
and it's better if it's pressed.
okay.
Okay, and canola oil does have some omega-3 in it. Those other oils are really high in omega-6. It's not that you can't eat them. It's just that we're eating too many of them. The omega-3s are the ones that protect us and reduce inflammation, and those are the ones we want. That's the wild salmon, it's your flaxseed, your nuts, your chia seeds, your sardines, it's, fish, things like that. Mostly that wild salmon. So those are the things you want to eat to reduce the inflammation, and you want to kind of limit those omega-6 fats.
What about coconut oil? Is that changed or is that bad?
The American Heart Association will say coconut oil it's a saturated fat. So there's three kinds of fats: saturated, polyunsaturated, and mono. These are the polys. The saturated are all the fats, the butter, all the fats in our meat, and coconut oil. But coconut oil has a lot of benefits to it. And it's a very different type it's a medium chain fatty acid, so it's different than all these other oils and stuff. So if you Google coconut oil and its benefits, it'll take you an hour to get through all the stuff. But the American Heart Association does not support coconut oil. And that'll change. I think that's going to change.
I think they get paid too much by the canola oil. Right?
That's right, by Mazola. And the sad thing is there hasn't been a lot of research done on the coconut oil. I know they've done some, but what happens is a lot of these big companies will support research that gets twisted around, and what they're finding is the whole research back in the I think it was the 80s, where they told us to eat these oils like the margarine. Well, the margarine is the trans fats, but to switch to all these oils, the studies were based on both the omega-3s and omega-6s together. So of course that oil looked good because they didn't separate them out. But the recent studies where they've separated them, they actually find that this omega-6 fat is not good for us, especially in high amounts. You're not going to be able to avoid this. These are your basic oils. You can't avoid them. They are in foods. But just try to limit how much you take in. I'm going to come back to this slide since we're on fats, and I'm going to go over here because this is one of the most deadliest of the fats. It's so bad that they now acknowledge this. It's the trans fat. So the margarine, all the partially hydrogenated oil. They now realize how bad it is for our health. They're pulling it out. In 2 years, it'll no longer be in the United States. It's sad that you know, it's been, 40 years we've been consuming this stuff, and now they realize how bad it is for us. This stuff is the worst. This is worse than the imbalance of the omega-6 and omega-3s that I just talked about. This is the worst thing that you can eat. The margarine, most people know not to eat margarine anymore, but I guess I don't know if that's true. I assume it is,
Is
but
margarine like Smart Balance?
Smart Balance is not margarine. Smart Balance is oil. It's like probably a bad oil though, probably, unless they use olive oil. I'm not sure what's in Smart Balance.
Yeah, I
They
know
have one that has olive.
there is
Yeah,
one
they have
that's
some
olive
olive oil
oil,
in there.
One
yeah,
has it
yeah.
on the label.
Because remember, olive oil is the good oil, but you can't, that's an oil you can't heat. So you can use that for salad dressings. You don't bake with it either. It can't get real hot, or it actually gets bad for us. A lot of these oils, if they're heated too hot, you just, I know, but they become toxic. They really do become,
Told you
they
she's a
become
pain,
bad.
didn't I?
Really? Oh.
I know, it's hard, there's a lot. I know, I'm sorry to throw this
Yeah.
all at you, but
Well,
And here I
But
think using the olive oil is like a good,
you
know.
can saute and stuff with it.
Yeah.
Oh,
On
okay.
a lower heat, you know, not something really hot. I wouldn't marinate anything in it if you're gonna put stuff on the grill, because oftentimes our grills get too hot. But you can use other oils. There's like avocado oil, which you can get now. I just saw it at Costco. And that's just as good as olive oil, and you can heat it. And it's got the same benefits as olive oil.
Really?
So think
Avocado
avocados, because
Avocado
avocados is
oil.
one of the good fats, one of the things we should be eating. So lots of guac. You know, think guac is good. Olive oil, avocado oil. There's a bunch of oil, like walnut oil. There's different oils that are really high in those omega-3s. But this trans fat is the margarines. I think even Crisco is a trans fat. So they have found that it increases your LDL, it decreases the HDL, which are your good cholesterol. It's really pro-inflammatory. They started putting this into foods to prolong the shelf life, so foods wouldn't spoil. And they're just finding out now that it's probably the worst thing, right up there with cigarette smoking. So it's too bad, but
We haven't eaten that food forever.
I bet, yeah. I mean, most people
Since you've
know
been-
not to eat it, but
Yeah, since you've been a hard, healthy diet, you
Yeah.
force everything.
Yeah, good.
Eliminate it all.
good. And then so the other big one, so those are the oils. So those are the two big things that are going to cause inflammation. And the other big hitter is this sugar. So sugar comes in many forms. Now the obvious forms are, table sugar, things that are sweet. Honey is sugar. Maple syrup is sugar. High fructose corn syrup and all the sodas is sugar. I'm sure most of you don't drink that stuff, but sugar is also in hidden things like flour. Flour, we consider things made with flour sugar because they turn to sugar really fast in our bodies. You've got other things that are real starchy vegetables we consider more of like they increase blood sugar, so we consider them kind of forms of sugar. Milk is sugar. A lot of people don't realize, they don't think of dairy, milk and yogurt, those are sugar, that's lactose. Fruit is sugar. So fruit is fructose, but fruit is a good sugar that we want to take in because of all the benefits in that fruit. Does that make sense? We don't want to limit fruit because of all of its benefits. But it still has sugar. I mean, fruit has sugar, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It does.
So we don't think of sugar always as those things like, milk and fruit, but they are.
I just heard a study today on TV about sugar, that the results are so bad, they're reducing the maximum daily intakes by like down to a fourth of what they were talking about. I mean, don't hold me to it, but it was
Yeah.
funny that you brought it up because it was just on TV this afternoon. And
Yeah.
really lowering it down, that the results are so bad.
This is the big one of the big causes of inflammation is sugar. And I know, when you think of heart disease, and this really topic, it really isn't just about heart disease, but when you think about heart disease, we're so focused on saturated fat and cholesterol and staying away from those things, when the reality is we should be really watching the sugar. We really should be. Excess sugar causes more than inflammation. It causes other problems that I don't even have time to talk about tonight. But the liver converts all your extra sugar to triglycerides. And what are triglycerides? Well, they can cause some damage too. We know that when you have a lipid panel and you have high triglycerides, the first thing I ask somebody is, hey, have you been drinking soda? Because we know they've been consuming a lot of sugar because that glucose that's not used anywhere in the body gets converted to triglycerides. Triglycerides is a storage form of fat. So, and it likes to jump onto those LDLs when they travel around in the blood. So triglycerides are not good, and too much sugar really causes a spike in those triglycerides. Back when I was in I was actually a freshman in college. I was 18 or 19. My father passed away, and he was 49 when he died. Massive heart attack. He had horrible disease that he didn't know about. And so they tested all of us kids, of course, our lipid panels, and mine was really bad. I can't remember the other kids, but mine was so bad they didn't know what to do with me. And I don't remember the numbers because I was so young, but I remember my overall cholesterol was 300. And I'm sure my triglycerides, I don't know, but my doctor put me on, I had to eat all this oat bran. And it brought me down, after 3 months of all this oat bran, this massive oat bran diet, it brought me down to like 270. But back in the 80s, what were we doing? Low fat, high carb. Here's your sugar, right there.
Yeah, don't eat the fat, but have the, what were those cookies that were fat-free?
Oh,
You know?
Oh,
Yeah.
Snackwells.
Snackwell
Yeah.
cookies.
and I mean back
So,
then that
I mean,
was what
yeah.
we did. And I was in sports. We like carbo loaded. It was called, we'd eat all these pasta and stuff the night before a game, which you don't need to do. But that's what we were told to do. So it was all pasta and bread and no fat. I don't remember eating much fat. I know I grew up with meat, but so that's an example of, because my lipid panel now, when I eat more eggs than I've ever eaten, is much better. But that's me. I don't want to, that's just an example of how that high carbohydrate diet, which is high sugar, can really mess things up. When you have an increased blood sugar, also it stops making that beneficial HDL. So that's another bad thing too. But you want to have a lot of those HDLs around. So, and this is all inflammation causing. There's something that, I don't know if any of you have had this done, but there is a C-reactive protein test that you can have done. I believe I've had this done. You don't want to do this, of course, when you're sick or ill. But this high sensitivity one that they now have come up with can actually, it's an indicator of how much inflammation is in your arteries, how much inflammation there is. So you want it less than 1 ideally, but this is a way to check. And this is kind of a common test. I mean, I've seen this test, maybe not as much recently, but I used to see it a lot. They'd run this test.
By
See
sickly
how-
meaning flu or cold.
Yeah, because
stuff like
then you're
that.
going to have a major inflammatory response within your body, because you have an illness that you're fighting off. So, but this is a way to test for inflammation. So you can always.
About every 6 months I have that done.
Did you?
Really?
Oh.
Yeah. Do you remember what it was? Did they say?
Yeah. we
Must
got
not have
it
been too
all-
worried about it if
No,
you don't
yeah.
know, because you
It's
wouldn't have.
all printed out,
Yeah.
my
They-
chart as they call it.
They will test for that. So that's really what I want you to remember about inflammation. And it's there are people that believe in the medical community that if there is no inflammation in the body, the LDLs can't penetrate that artery and deposit its cholesterol in there. So they feel those arteries become inflamed, and that's kind of the cause of heart disease. Now, I'm not saying that is or isn't. I think there are a lot of factors that are involved with heart disease specifically, but there are people that do believe that without this inflammation, that LDL just floats around your blood causing no problem. And it doesn't really matter if it's high or low. If it's high, it's more susceptible to being injured and being able to penetrate. But if that lining of your artery is healthy, those LDLs probably aren't able to get in there. It's just a thought. I mean, that there are people in the medical community that believe that. The other thing that you can do is increase activity. Of course, this is kind of obvious. We know we need to exercise, and what I wanted to talk about tonight is kind of what METs are, and what high intensity interval training is, and what you can do when you're exercising, either at the gym or out for a walk, because these things are kind of important. Knowing how much energy you're using while doing an activity and trying to improve on that. I think that's really important. Recent studies have shown, and these are real recent, and we've always known that exercise is really good for us, but just 30 minutes of a moderate exercise 6 days per week can reduce the risk of early death by like 40%. So that's pretty big, but this is not walking your dog. This is a brisk walk. This is a walk like you are late for an appointment. That's, you're getting your heart rate up. Regular exercise, increases the HDLs, lowers your bad cholesterol, reduces stress, it helps you lose weight, lowers your blood pressure. So exercise is great. The METs, are all of you familiar with what METs are? When you're at the gym, you're not going to be able to measure METs when you're out on a walk, but like on a piece of equipment at the gym. So METs and watts, you can really use either one if you want. But a MET is basically how much energy you're using while you're doing that particular activity. And watts are power that you're creating on the bike. So if you're biking, your watts are going to be how much power you're creating while you're on that bike. And it's similar to METs. METs is how much energy and oxygen you're using. So if you're at 5 METs, by just increasing 1 MET within a year's time, it's not always easy to go up a MET, but if you can increase 1 MET, you're dropping your risk of heart attack by 12.5%. So if you go up by 2 METs, you've reduced your risk by 25%, and that's pretty big. So if your METs are starting out pretty low and it's easy to go up, then you're really not exercising hard enough. It shouldn't be that easy to increase these METs. I mean, really, when you're exercising, you should be breaking a sweat. And pay attention to these METs when you're on a piece of equipment. If you're like me and I don't exercise on equipment at the gym that often, but I'm outside a lot on a bike, I have to kind of go by how I feel. But I do more of this high interval, this training where I go as hard as I can up a hill. And you can do that too while walking. You can walk as fast as you can up a hill and slow back down. That's kind of what the interval training is. You take little blocks of time and you really push it hard. And then you slow down. And then you push it hard. It's like running between driveways and then walking the next driveway. And then running to the next driveway. And I know a lot of us can't run. I have a hard time running because of my knees. So I'm just using running as an example. But if you're outside, you can do the same thing. You can't really measure METs, but you can do this interval training, which has been shown to be one of the best ways that we can exercise now, even if you can do little bits of this. Instead of the continuous 30 minutes on the treadmill, treadmills are tough to do this. But if you're on a bike, for example, we've been doing this with Glenn and other people in the program. If you're on a bike and you're biking at 70 reps per minute, which is pretty fast, it's a good speed. It's a moderate pace. You would, for 15 to 30 seconds, you would increase it to 80 to 85 reps. You're going to pedal faster, and you're watching the clock, and then you're going to come back down to 70. That's what the interval training is. And so this is kind of new research that's out there, but they are finding that this type of training actually helps improve insulin sensitivity. That's the biggest benefit. So what that means is your body is going to be able to, insulin is going to be able to pull sugar out of the bloodstream and put it into the cells more effectively. Because that's what insulin does. When we eat sugar, even if though it's that bread, Glenn, you're eating that big sandwich, that bread is, we have to count that bread as sugar. It's okay to do that, but your body counts that as sugar. And so, your pancreas secretes insulin, and insulin's job is to take that sugar out of the blood and put it in the cells, get it out, So this interval training has been shown to really help with that. It also improves aerobic capacity better than just this regular, walking at the same pace for 30 minutes. This is really easy to do. And I hope more people start doing this. And these are just some of the benefits to this high intensity interval training. They use this a lot to lose weight. This is a good thing if you want to drop some weight. This is where a lot of the research has been done in weight loss. So they kind of feel if you get your heart rate up a little bit in spurts, and you can do it as often as you don't have to do it the entire 30 minutes. You can just do, if you can do 2 of them, if you can do 5 of them, 5 short spurts of pushing it harder, And so you can let them know what you've been doing.
So I've been doing this, I think you talked to me about 3 weeks ago, and I've been doing it a little over 2 weeks now. And and you guys have been paying attention to me, I haven't changed much, I've been kind of not good all the last 2 years. but I can start to feel the difference, and I can, even in my breathing on the bike. And I used to start off at 3, 4, 5, I haven't been up to 6 for a while, but now I'm doing it like 3, 5, or then 4, 6, kind of between. And I'm getting off that bike not exhausted. And I used to have to go back, and I'm not even resting for 2 hours. It might be half hour now. I used to go home after rehab, and I have to rest for 2 hours. And but I'm just that change, and I don't get it either, but it works. And I think I haven't sweat. That bothers me that I can't seem to sweat yet, but I think it's the medicines kind of.
Yeah, and the heart,
But
keeping your
hopefully I'll
heart
be
rate
able to
down.
do that pretty soon. But I have noticed a difference. I'm starting to improve, which is really a neat feeling.
I'll sweat for you.
Huh? You'll sweat? Okay. Yeah, I remember you used to do pretty good.
Yeah, you're not the only one. I know, it's hard. It's hard. But this is easy to do, and it's harder to do on treadmills just because you have to, you constantly have to push buttons. Whereas you're on a bike, you can just pick up the pace. You don't have to touch any buttons, you just pedal faster. And you can do it for 15 seconds, you can do it for 30 seconds, 45 seconds, a minute. Glenn's been doing it a minute, that's a long time. And so the idea of this is actually, if you're doing this correctly, if you were an athlete without heart disease, to do this correctly, you're actually sprinting. You're actually almost getting your max heart rate for short spurts. I'm not recommending that, you guys do that, but you can kind of, modify this however you want. And I think for me, I'm not a runner, but I've been running between driveways, because running, so, I already walk pretty fast. So when I'm outside, I have to actually run, which isn't good for my knees, but I do it anyway, I guess, so.
I watch my heart rate, and I never can get over 80. Now, part of it's the
I
medicine.
think you did the other day.
And now I'm up in
Yeah.
the 90s.
Yeah,
Okay, so not only, in 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks.
just kind of pushing it a little
I'm
bit.
not into the high 90s.
Yeah.
Prior to this all going on, I was up to around 110, 112. But I haven't been able, but I can tell, for some reason, that interval stuff works.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff they tell me makes sense after a while.
I think this is hard too. I mean, I think it's great. I don't know everybody here, but I think it's great. Like, you guys come as much as you do and exercise. Gary, I think you come like every day of the week. I mean, I think that's huge. It's hard to do this. I mean, if you can go take 30 minutes and go for a brisk walk, that's one thing. But to go to a gym and actually, it's not that easy for everybody to do. And making exercise a priority because it's so important is something we all need to do, including myself. It's not always easy to do either. And then,
Yes,
Can I ask you a question?
yeah,
You kind of alluded to medication that controls heartbeat.
Yeah.
And I had that issue. So, and you may not want to address this because, obviously I'm
no,
not a
it's all right.
doctor, but what do
beta
you,
blockers.
what
Yeah.
do you, if you're supposed to control your heartbeat, mainly it's so that it doesn't go off the deep end and start beating, like that.
Yeah,
But when you're doing this and then you increase your heart rate, is that okay?
absolutely. Yeah, and you have to go by how you feel. You don't need to monitor your heart rate. I mean, if you have a heart rate monitor, great. We monitor patients right now in our phase 2 program because they're on our monitors, so we can see what's going on. You have to go by how you feel and really just making yourself work harder. If you're out for a walk and you decide for 30 seconds that you are gonna pick it up, you don't have to run, but however you can do that. For example, doing hills. So when you come to a hill, you're gonna work harder. That's kind of interval training,
Sure,
as long as you keep the same pace.
but you're not it's
But
not
it doesn't
destroying
matter
the
really.
effect of the meds?
No, it doesn't matter what you're doing. You're not gonna know what your just heart rate isn't gonna be 140 like mine. Your heart rate's gonna be 90.
Okay.
But if you're gonna kind of go off how you feel, not really what your heart rate is doing, and I would recommend that for everybody. I don't wear a heart rate monitor. I just do spurts of, like, somebody's chasing me and I gotta run, or I gotta sprint, I got somebody passing me, I'm on a race. I just in my mind, and it's short spurts of that. It doesn't have to be a minute or two. If you're pushing yourself hard enough, you can't last that long. So they can be just whatever you can tolerate.
Okay, thanks.
And just, making yourself feel like you're working a lot harder for that short period of time and then backing down. What I've seen a couple people do when we've been introducing this is there's one guy who works he's like almost he's at his target heart rate and he's doing this on the SiFit, and then all of a sudden, 'cause, he's, like, almost to his, he's at his target heart rate and he's doing this on the SiFit, and then all of a sudden, he's so tired, and he's doing it for 15 seconds all out, as hard as he can, and then 15 seconds he's so tired, he's like, now he's actually pedaling slower. And you don't want to do that. You've got to bring it down to where you started. You don't want to come back down. So if you're at like a 70 reps per minute on a bike, that's how fast you're pedaling, and then you increase it to 100, you don't want to drop down to 50 to rest. You got to drop down to 70. I mean, that's kind of the idea. You don't want to, you want to pick it up, but you don't want to do it too much that it's so exhausting that you can't get back to where you started before that increase, if that makes sense. So we've had people doing that where they push it so hard, but then they're like, oh, and then they have to like slow, really slow down to kind of catch their breath. That's probably overdoing it. You should be able to come back down to where you were started and not go below that. People do this on the treadmill too. They all of a sudden will increase the speed so that they're running, and they'll run for a certain amount of time, and then they'll walk, and they'll run, or they'll increase the incline on the treadmill. It's just easiest to do it on the bikes, any kind of bike, because all you got to do is pick up the speed and then slow back down. There's no buttons involved. One other thing I want to say too is try to be more active during the day. So besides exercise, activity is really important. Being active is important. Walking places, taking the stairs if you can. Just your basic, if you can be active and have an active lifestyle, that is really important too. And then heart rate recovery, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but if we have anybody in here who considers themselves pretty fit, your heart rate is going to come down really fast to recovery, the better shape you're in. So if you're in really good shape, you can get your heart rate up really high, and in a minute recovery, it's going to come down really fast. We won't see that a lot in heart programs, but I just wanted to mention that if anybody monitors their heart rate, if you're having a hard time getting your heart rate down, it is a predictor of future events and that kind of thing. So not everybody pays attention to heart rate, but I just wanted to throw that in there. And I've seen that with some patients. We have seen patients that come in that never exercise, and I can tell their heart rates do not want to come back down. They take forever. I mean, I'm talking like 20 minutes. And then we have patients who are really, we've got a guy who bikes a ton. I mean, he bikes for an hour and a half every day. His heart rate comes down like that. And when he's exercising too, his blood pressures are an indicator. When we take his pressures when he's exercising, you can tell he's in really good shape. But that's kind of something you can measure at home. And we want that heart rate to come down, and the faster it comes down, the better shape you're in. Also too, weights. A lot of us aren't doing enough weights, including body weight exercise, and we have to remember that weights are really important for a lot of reasons. We need to build muscle, which burns more calories, and we need to strengthen our bones. And as we age, we lose both of those automatically, muscle and bone. The more weight you put on your muscle, so for example, if I'm lifting a 5-pound weight, I'm not really putting much strain on my bicep. If I have a 20-pound weight, I'm putting more strain on this muscle. And therefore, what's happening to this bone right here? It's getting strained, and that's what we want. We want those bones to be strained. That makes sense because that will prevent bone loss. If you're lifting real light weights, it's not going to do much for your bone. I'm not suggesting you to lift really heavy weights, but I've seen people do weights like this with a weight. I think you know who I'm talking about. I'm like, that is not doing anything. It's not doing anything for your bones. And doing any kind of body weight exercise, such as walking,
Pick
is
on PBR, you ain't here.
no, I wouldn't do that. But any kind of weight-bearing exercise helps stimulate bones. Okay, so if you're walking, that's good. Biking does not, unfortunately. Swimming does not, but any kind of walking, jump rope, anything that stimulates those big bones. But I don't think really we lift enough weights, and I don't necessarily mean getting big, huge dumbbells and barbells, but even doing a squat with your own body weight is a huge exercise that almost everybody should be doing if they can do it. A simple squat where you squat and sit into a chair and you come back up, for an example.
Oh, sit in a chair and
yeah,
not
so
go all the way down to the floor?
Yeah, well, you don't have to.
My
You can
knees
do
can't
this.
go down
No,
there.
yeah. So
I
it's-
have to bend through my
yeah,
back.
Yeah, I know. I
Yeah.
know, me too. I know. So just simple
Okay.
exercises like that. We need to incorporate more of those.
Yeah.
We need to maintain our muscle, okay? And we need to prevent bone loss. It's really important, and we sometimes forget about that. We all know we need, weight loss, how important weight loss is, and all I'm really going to say about this, because I think we're probably talking too much, but it's important to make little lifestyle changes that you can stick with. And I try to tell people that I believe in the 80-20 rule, so you try to eat really well 80% of the time, 20% of the time you can allow for some indulgences, right? I mean, that's the only way you can really stick with something like a real healthy diet. You should be able to eat, and have a little something. Have a little pizza, a little birthday cake, right? So,
Donuts in the morning?
donuts. That donut, those donuts are the perfect example of my sugar and bad fat. The inflammatory donut. I'm gonna start putting a sign up.
What that's about
Inflammatory
everybody else, there's a group of guys and ladies that exercise at 7 o'clock to about 8 o'clock, and we have our own shirts for different days. And on your birthday and on a day when you bring the wrong shirt, you owe snacks. So we bring a lot of donuts, and it seems like
You
everybody's
don't bring donuts.
having like 2 or 3 birthdays a year
You
now.
bring this real nasty tasting,
Yeah.
cream
Cheryl brought us-
filled, chocolate covered.
And that stuff, you should be able to eat that once in a while, but you guys you eat a lot of donuts, I gotta say. And donuts are tough, but one thing I can say about the donuts, that's probably never gonna stop, right? So what I would recommend with the donuts, cut them in half. Cut them in quarters.
Cheryl tried that. Everybody had 4 or 8.
Oh,
Didn't you know we're all retired cops?
oh my gosh.
What we do
Mine
is
is
So-
our
I'll take
meals,
half
is
of
we
yours,
have a
too.
small plate like this, and that's our meal. And
Perfect.
no
And that's
extras.
reduce the portions, that's right. I mean, that's all you have to do. An example would be